In today's episode, we delve into 3 harrowing accounts from individuals who, during what should have been peaceful camping experiences, found themselves in encounters so disturbing they left indelible marks on their lives. These chilling stories will hold you captive. On the evening of May 15, 1997, a 27-year-old named Jadit was settled into his RV near the Everglades National Park in Florida. With his loyal German Shepherd lying at his feet, Jadita was unwinding, unaware of the events about to unfold. Around 9 p.m., his dog began acting unusually, scratching at the RV door as if eager to go outside. Accustomed to his dog's routine, Jadit thought little of it, assuming his pet simply needed a quick bathroom break. He opened the door, letting his German Shepherd step out into the evening darkness. But then, moments later, a single alarming yelp pierced the quiet night. It was unlike any sound Jadit had ever heard from his dog, and it immediately filled him with dread. Grabbing his flashlight, Jadit hurried outside, sweeping the beam back and forth in search of his beloved companion. Initially, there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the empty stillness of the night. But as his flashlight moved across the ground, he froze. Roughly 20 feet away, illuminated by his flashlight, was an unearthly creature. The creature was an eerie yellow and stood about 3 feet tall, appearing to weigh around 100 pounds. But what transfixed Jadit were its eyes, green and glowing, undeterred by the beam of the flashlight. As he stood there, heart pounding, he noticed even more terrifying details. 5 distinct spines ran along its back, each spine approximately 2.5 feet in length. Then his gaze fell to the creature's feet, and horror overtook him. There lay his German Shepherd, lifeless, in the clutches of the creature, which was actively feeding on his once mighty companion. His dog, a 120-pound shepherd who had once fiercely defended their home against 2 coyotes, now lay defeated in the jaws of this nightmarish being. As Jadit shouted in a desperate attempt to scare off the creature, it reacted. Its head snapped up, emitting a piercing mechanical screech that sounded unnervingly like metal scraping against metal. In a swift, unnaturally smooth motion, it turned and sprinted into the darkness on 2 legs, moving at an inhuman speed. Shaking with horror, Jadit cautiously approached his fallen companion. The scene was sickening. His dog lay lifeless, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle, with 2 prominent fang marks puncturing its throat. Something even more disturbing caught his attention. When Jadit placed his hand on the dog's body, it felt hollow, as though everything inside had been drained away. Before he could fully process this nightmare, another screech echoed in the distance, answered almost immediately by another from a different direction. Panic set in as Jadit realized there could be more of these creatures, seemingly communicating with one another. Driven by fear but determined to document this horrifying encounter, Jadit carefully lifted his large German Shepherd's body, carrying it back to his RV. His background as a mortician in Tampa prepared him somewhat for preserving remains, so he laid his dog in the RV's small bathtub and surrounded it with all the ice he could find from his freezer. Outside, the mechanical screeches grew louder, inching closer. Without a second thought, he started the RV, leaving behind all his camping gear as he sped towards Okapi, the nearest town with a veterinary clinic 30 miles away. He kept checking his rearview mirror, half expecting to see those monstrous figures following him. When he arrived at the clinic close to midnight, the place was closed, but an emergency contact number was posted on the door. The veterinarian, Dr. Martinez, arrived 20 minutes later to find Jadit still in his RV, paralyzed with fear. As Dr. Martinez examined the dog's body, his expression turned grim, his hands frozen as he inspected the unusual fang marks. After a long silence, he looked at Jadit and said, "You're not the first to bring in an animal with these injuries." Martinez went to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder filled with photographs. The images showed various animals, cattle, horses, all with similar injuries, broken necks and identical fang marks. He explained that these cases had been reported for months, but authorities dismissed them as panther or bear attacks. Yet, in his 22 years as a vet in the Everglades, he had never seen a natural predator cause such injuries. The vet revealed a map marked with the locations of each incident, forming a disturbing pattern steadily moving north through the Everglades, inching closer to more populated areas. Just a week prior, 3 guard dogs at a construction site near Naples had been killed under similar circumstances. Security footage had vanished, and the local police attributed it to vandalism. despite the unmistakable fang marks. Jadith was stunned. How could such a grave threat be kept from the public? When he asked why no one seemed to know about these incidents, Dr. Martinez's response was chilling. He explained that each time someone reported an encounter to local wildlife officials or the police, strange men in unmarked vehicles arrived within hours. They confiscated all evidence and assured witnesses it was merely a bear attack, silencing any talk of the incident. But bears don't drain their prey, Dr. Martinez added gravely, and they don't leave marks like these. Martinez then mentioned a local ranger who 3 months earlier had tried to go public with similar findings. The ranger had gathered photos, videos, and plaster casts of unusual footprints. However, the day before his scheduled press conference, he abruptly resigned and left the state without a word. It was clear to Jadith that something sinister was at work. After sharing his findings, Dr. Martinez cast a wary glance toward the parking lot, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You need to leave, now," he told Jadith. "I've already said too much, but someone has to know. Too many animals are dying." Martinez tightened his grip on his arm, saying he had one last secret to reveal. He explained that 2 days prior, he'd found something embedded in a fang mark on a dead cow, a metallic tooth. Yet, it wasn't made of any material he'd ever seen before. Before he could elaborate, the familiar mechanical screeching sound echoed from behind the clinic. Both men froze, exchanging a look of shared dread. Without a second thought, Jadith sprinted to his RV, locking the doors and pulling down the shades. But even in his secured vehicle, the unnerving screeching persisted through the night. At some point, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into a strange, fragmented dream of bright lights and tall, glowing figures. When he awoke the next morning, he remembered only fleeting, elusive images that evaporated like mist when he tried to recall them. A sharp knock broke the silence. Jadith opened his door to find 3 men in black suits standing outside, faces expressionless. Without introductions or badges, they informed him that Dr. Martinez had retired suddenly overnight and had already moved away to be with family. They then stated that his dog's body had been disposed of due to health concerns and handed him an official document which claimed his dog had died from a rare viral infection. The tallest man produced another document, a non-disclosure agreement. Signing it, he explained, would grant Jadith financial compensation, but would also mean he was bound by law never to discuss the events in the Everglades or his conversation with the vet. Violation would incur severe legal repercussions under the guise of national security. It wasn't until years later that Jadith anonymously shared his experience with trusted sources. The events of that night in May 1997, the cryptic creatures, the abrupt disappearance of Dr. Martinez, the men in black, and the rash of unexplained animal deaths were never officially acknowledged or explained. A second encounter, August 20th, 2011. Years later, on a warm August evening, a group of friends prepared for what they thought would be an ordinary weekend of camping in rural Wisconsin. The young man leading the group was joined by his older and younger brothers, their girlfriends, his best friend, and his older brother's friend and girlfriend. After an hour's drive down winding back roads, they arrived at a secluded property with a small cabin nestled beside a lake. The afternoon was ideal for camping, and after unloading and setting up their gear, the group relaxed with a swim in the lake. As evening descended, they gathered around a crackling campfire, enjoying dinner and camaraderie, unaware of the unsettling night that lay ahead. As the group settled around the campfire that night, their laughter and chatter filled the air, conversation drifting to the upcoming school year. Everything was perfectly normal, a classic camping trip with friends. Around 10 p.m., however, the mood shifted when a brilliant blue object suddenly blazed across the sky, illuminating the entire area for several breathtaking seconds. Stunned, the group stared upward, speculating about what they'd just witnessed. Most agreed it was likely a large meteor, and after a few minutes of lively discussion, they returned to other topics. As midnight approached, people began heading to their tents. The main witness leaned over to his girlfriend. hinting they retreat to their tent for a bit of privacy. But mid-sentence, his gaze caught something unusual gliding over the treetops across the lake. He stood up quickly, calling to his brother to come see, but his brother brushed him off, clearly preoccupied. More urgently, he called out again, this time with enough intensity to get everyone's attention. His best friend and girlfriend joined him, watching the lake, and soon even his irritated brother came over, now curious. What they saw was eerie. A luminous, silent object hovered low over the lake, moving slowly back and forth. The glow from the object cast an ethereal light over the water and surrounding area, yet it emitted no sound whatsoever. Peering through binoculars, his brother noted that the object lacked any identifiable features, just a smooth, glowing presence. The group stood transfixed as it drifted silently. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, it vanished, as though someone had flipped a switch, leaving only a faintly glowing circle on the lake's surface. Within moments, even that faint light dissolved, leaving them in darkness, as if nothing had happened. Just then, he froze. He could see shadows moving past his tent. One, then another and another, until 4 distinct figures passed by in eerie silence. Initially, he assumed it was someone from their group, but that idea quickly vanished as he observed their strange appearance. Each figure was only about 3 to 4 feet tall, with disproportionately long, slender arms that hung down nearly to their knees. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, and they seemed to be examining the campsite, shuffling back and forth between the tents. One of the beings lightly traced its hand across his tent fabric, and he lay paralyzed, desperately hoping they wouldn't try to enter. After about 15 agonizing minutes, the figures left in a silent, single-file procession, vanishing into the shadows. Soon after, a deep rumble of thunder broke the silence, and within minutes a fierce thunderstorm descended on the campsite, rain pouring down in torrents. The following morning, his brother woke him, grumbling that raccoons must have rifled through their campsite overnight, as several items were moved. When the main witness recounted what he'd seen, the group was skeptical, suggesting it must have been a vivid dream. Yet the unsettling memory of those beings, their strange proportions, silent movements, and how they had grazed his tent, stayed with him, leaving an impression far too vivid to dismiss. Driving down a rough, winding dirt road in their work truck, they braced against the constant jolts from deep potholes and protruding roots. Finally, they reached a point where the terrain became impassable by vehicle. Gathering their equipment, vials, testing kits, GPS units, they set off on foot to complete the remainder of the journey. The afternoon passed smoothly as they methodically collected samples, marked coordinates, and followed their routine checklist. The weather was idyllic, with temperatures in the mid-70s, a clear sky, and a gentle breeze, perfect conditions for their fieldwork. Around 3:30 p.m., as they neared the end of their tasks, they prepared to ascend a modest rock formation, about 8 or 9 feet high, that required a short scramble to the top. Michael, the lead surveyor, reached the top first. But as he did, he abruptly froze, staring ahead in stunned silence. Cody, close behind, accidentally collided with him, causing one of their collection containers to tumble down the rock. But even this mishap was quickly forgotten as he looked at Michael's face. Michael, usually composed and unflappable, now displayed an expression of sheer terror. He couldn't speak or move, only gesturing helplessly in front of him. Perplexed and increasingly alarmed, Cody pushed past him to see what had triggered such a reaction. What he saw would be etched into his memory forever. Down by the creek, a large, smoky gray figure, distinctly humanoid, stood knee-deep in the water. It held a sharp stick and was methodically stabbing at fish, its movements both deliberate and unsettling. The creature was about 7 feet tall, with extraordinarily long arms that nearly reached the water, even as it stood upright. Trained observers by profession, Michael and Cody were skilled at documenting even the smallest environmental details, but this sight defied everything they knew. The creature seemed to sense their presence, suddenly turning its head to look at them. As their eyes met, it wore an expression of unmistakable fear, mirroring the horror on their own faces. Neither man spoke. They were paralyzed by the sheer improbability of what they were witnessing. That day would leave an indelible mark on their lives, reshaping their understanding of the wilderness they had once known so well. There was no protocol for what Michael and Cody encountered that day. No section on their data sheets could account for a massive humanoid creature fishing in a forest creek. When the creature looked up at them, its face held eerily human-like features, yet somehow distorted, alien. And then, it did something truly bizarre. In a sudden fluid motion, the creature leapt onto a massive boulder, locking its gaze on them. It raised its immense hands, attached to muscular, powerful arms, and slapped the boulder with such force that a loud, resounding smack echoed through the forest. Using the force of the impact, it propelled itself through the air to another rock, all the while maintaining eye contact with the stunned surveyors. With each leap, the creature struck the next rock with a similar force, producing reverberating sounds that amplified the surreal atmosphere. Finally, with one last powerful jump, it disappeared into the dense tree line, leaving Michael and Cody rooted in shock. As reality snapped back, both men bolted through the forest, abandoning any attempt to follow their usual trail. They tore through the underbrush, leaping over fallen trees and crashing through vegetation in a desperate, unplanned dash back to their truck. Strange, echoing sounds followed them as they ran, but neither dared to look back. When they finally reached their vehicle, their hands shook so badly that it took several attempts to get the keys into the ignition. They drove back to their office in silence, too shaken to report what they had just seen. Back at the office, they dropped off their water samples and left without a word. The lead surveyor called in sick the following day. When he returned, he promptly requested a transfer to a different district. Both men, who had spent years in the field, refused to return to that location ever again. To this day, one of them won't even discuss the incident, while the other speaks of it only in rare, hushed tones. Both Michael and Cody were Native American, raised in the area, familiar with every type of animal in the forest, and deeply versed in the traditional stories passed down through generations. Yet nothing in their experience could explain what they had witnessed. The true nature of that mysterious creature remains unknown to this day, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that still lurk in the untamed corners of the world.